My name is Jordyne Carmack, and I'm super excited to be here at the Holler Creative. I love working at Cumberland and getting to help students see the world both as consumers, but then also as potentially professionals in the strategic comm or marketing communication workplace.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Hollercast, a show produced by the Holler Creative out of Cumberland, Kentucky, whose mission is to bring hope and opportunity to the Appalachian region. We've got a really cool episode for you guys today. With us in the studio, we have Dr. Jordyne Carmack, who teaches strategic communication courses at the University of the Cumberlands. So she is a professor that teaches a lot of the same things that we do here at the Holler. It's going to be cool to see from her side of things what she's teaching students and what she thinks that professionals should know. Dr. Carmack is also involved with a nonprofit organization called 127 Worldwide. So we'll get to hear from her a bit of how her marketing and communication background plays into that role and helps her out in it. So we'll get to hear more about that later on in the podcast. So thank you guys for listening and stay tuned. Hello and welcome back to the Hollercast, this show produced by the Holler Creative out of Cumberland, Kentucky, whose mission is to bring hope and opportunity back to the Appalachian region. Today in the studio we have Ford Edwards yet again and a very special guest, Dr. Jordyne Carmack.
Hey.
Dr. Carmack was actually one of Ford and I's professors at University of Cumberland, so it's a treat to have her back and in our office, and she's seen us practice the stuff that she taught us, so that's really cool to get to be a part of.
It might be my new favorite thing too, and I can take some of the blame and some of the credit for all the things that happened too.
Absolutely. So, Icebreaker Question, we've asked the same thing to everyone. The question is, what is your go-to gas station snack and drink?
Go-to gas station snack and drink. So I'm one of those low sugar nerds. So there's not a lot at a gas station that I can actually eat that doesn't have boatloads of sugar in it. But if I've got to run through the gas station, you can almost always find one of those little protein packs that has some almonds or peanuts and then a little bit of turkey or pepperoni and cheese. Like those sort of basically the grown-up version of a Lunchable. Is what I'm picking out whenever I'm at the gas station. And a big bottle of water.
That's funny. It's pretty like a polarizing question, I've come to realize. It's like a Red Bull and Flamin' Hot Cheetos. Or
oh my
like
gosh.
Someone's like, just almonds and water.
Mm-hmm.
We've been on a streak for waters, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And nuts. Like, yours had nuts in it.
Mm-hmm.
2020. Nuts. Maybe it's just like the new year.
Cashews are the bomb. That's where it is.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess to give everyone a bit more context of what you have to say and who you are, could you tell us a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. So I'm an assistant professor of communication arts in the communication arts department at University of the Cumberlands in Williamsburg. So I'm wrapping up my 5th year as an instructor, which is pretty exciting. Feels like just yesterday and forever at the same time. So my PhD is actually in leadership and Christian ministry. So a little bit different. And then my graduate degree is from West Virginia University in integrated marketing communication. So sort of an interesting blend between the two. But I love working at Cumberland and getting to help students see the world both as consumers, but then also as potentially professionals in the strategic comm or marketing communication workplace. So that's a little bit about education. And then my husband and I live in London, and we've got 2 little dogs, Waylon and Fitz, who are, pretty much the equivalent of a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old running around, boys, mind you, running around your house. But that's me.
So what made you want to become a college professor in the first place?
So that was not my initial career goal. In fact, I think when I started college, I swore up and down I would never teach. I didn't want to be a teacher. That was not something I was interested in until I actually was working in the admissions office doing marketing communication, running social media, putting together print marketing pieces, those sort of things. I had just finished my graduate degree, and I was approached by the chair of the communication department. They were looking to create the first social media class on campus. I won't tell you what year this is, but that'll date me a little bit. And so I said, well, sure, that sounds like fun. I can come and hang out with college students, and we can figure out what this whole social media thing is. And I fell in love with teaching in that first class.
Wow.
And And even though I had swore it was never something I was going to do, I realized I actually loved college students. But I didn't ever want to work in secondary education. So I sort of fell into it.
Yeah, so the question I was going to ask, one of them was why did you choose Cumberland's? But I guess that's just where you were at the time, and it worked out that way.
Right place, right time, depending on your background. I would say it was definitely a divine appointment for me. I am not from Kentucky. I'm from Texas originally. Walked on campus at Cumberland during a whole host of college visits, did this grand college tour and saw colleges in Tennessee and Kentucky and North Carolina and Georgia. I mean, I went a little bit of everywhere and stepped on campus and felt the Lord say, this place is going to be important to you. Yeah. And at first I thought just for, this is where I'm going to go to school. Yeah. And I've been at Cumberland 12 years now. So it became a lot more than that. Yeah. It'll be that important.
Cool. So, it was just a social media class when it started out, and now it's this whole, Ford didn't get to go through it, but it's a whole strategic communication
track,
within the comm department. So what was the process like? Was it more them saying we need this, or is it you saying we need this to be a whole program?
I would definitely say a combination of both. If you think about the timing of that, that would have been about 2014 or so. So in terms of the marketplace, there was a lot shifting, and there started to be an increased emphasis on branding and on really combining a lot of the elements of the marketing mix under one cohesive strategy. And it wasn't over. And so my graduate degree is in integrated marketing communication. And so I'd just come out of this program that basically said we need to stop separating our marketing from our communication when we are working as businesses. We have to see everything we do potentially as marketing, but then also as communication, because our goal is to build relationships with our consumers and with the people who spend time with us in order to build a long-term relationship and brand loyalty. So where we were at the time was you sort of were able to sort of pick whatever electives that you wanted, and we realized we needed to provide a more cohesive and structured approach to the communication major. There were video production classes already, there were graphic design classes already, and we realized that, over in the business program, you could take some marketing classes, but there weren't a lot of opportunities for you to begin to create print ads, to create social media content, to shoot commercials, but then also have the research side and looking into your audience's behavior. And so we realized there was sort of not a hole in what we were offering, but an opportunity to meet a need in the workplace.
So you just come out of getting your master's. How did you put your master's to use in your first job at admissions?
Well, so I got the job first. I got a year into it. It was a new position. A friend of mine had recommended me for it. Got into that job, and about 6 months in realized I don't know what I'm doing. Well, we didn't have at that point much of unlike now, the university now has a robust, excellent marketing communication department. And at the time, things were very siloed. That really didn't exist. And so I'll be honest, I was flying by the seat of my pants on a lot of it, just trying things out. Does this work? Does that work? And realizing surely there was something I could have studied that would have helped me. And so I started researching graduate programs at that point, because it wasn't my undergraduate experience. My undergraduate degree was in communication, but my focus was on TV broadcasting. And so I wanted to produce news, was what my education was. And so when I ended up in this other job, I realized I needed to find out more, and it exposed me to this whole world of marketing communication, both from the business side, but also the creative side.
Yeah, my story was sort of similar to that. I came into Cumberland's kind of thinking I wanted to go in a creative field, and then that turned into photojournalism, and then that turned into solely journalism, and then a conversation with Jordan was kind of like, why don't you do marketing communication as your minor, and like integrate that with your journalism degree. Like, you get to be creative, you get to learn more about graphic design, you get to do all these cool things that you want to do, but it was kind of like something that you were going to be taking classes for outside of that. Thanks to, in part, Jordan. It was a super fruitful experience.
What I love about this conversation is because Ford took some of my very first classes that I was teaching. And then, James, you got to see once things really had a little bit more structure and we'd done them a few times, you were able to be on that end of it. So I guess Ford got to see more of my mistakes than he did everything else.
It was fun, though. We all went through it together.
We had a good time.
Because there was like a group of students that all went through each class together.
It still's like that. You sort of have a cohort that you go through with. And I always get a little sad when that cohort graduates. And I'm usually at that point getting a new set. But I missed you guys when you leave.
I'm sad. So I want to like switch gears a bit, and then we can come back and tie these two together at the end. So I know you're involved in a nonprofit called 127 Worldwide, I believe.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what that is and then what your role is within the
Sure.
organization?
So 127 Worldwide is a global widow and orphan care organization that seeks to meet the needs of orphans and widows by connecting believers around the world. And so it's both connecting our brothers and sisters in Christ in those situations internationally who are already doing great work in their own communities with people in the United States who have a desire to just walk alongside them in their ministry. So I came and ran into this organization, 2013 maybe. 127 is actually only 8 or 9 years old, so it's not it's a little bit youthful on the nonprofit side, but at the time it was brand new, and I went to Kenya to visit one of their earliest partners with my friend Amanda Walton, and learned a lot about orphan care and some best practices, and it was just it was a life-changing experience for me. And so I've actually been back to Kenya to serve with a couple of different partners 5 different times, taking college students with me, not with the intention of, we have something to give, but we have something to learn from our brothers and sisters that are already doing incredible ministry, serving God, caring for their communities. And so one of the ways that I've been able to serve with 127, and actually this is interesting because my very first trip, when we got ready to go and serve, my friend Amanda had asked me to go several times. And I remember sitting in my office in admissions thinking, what on earth would I do in Africa? Because I'm a marketing person. I have no medical skills. I don't have an education background. I can't teach little kids. Like, I wasn't teaching at the time. It felt like there was no way. I was not a Bible scholar. In fact, I was still pretty early on in terms of the maturity of my faith. It felt like I had nothing to offer in this context. And then she showed me this video that they had put together detailing, talking about their partners and what God was doing there. And I remember so clearly the Lord just saying, marketing communications is a skill that can support this effort. In fact, the video I was watching was an example of how God could use someone's creative skill set to share the message of what he was doing. And so that really opened my eyes. And so a lot of what I've done with 127 through the years has been consulting on a marketing communication side, as well as being an advocate for orphan and widow care in the United States. So speaking on their behalf, speaking on behalf of our partners. So lots of communication skills there. But then also one of the coolest things we did last summer with actually one of the Holler Creative's interns, Nikki Patterson, she and I got to sit down with Peter Obungu, who's one of our partners in Nairobi, and his marketing communication guy, and help them tailor their messaging for an American audience.
That's awesome. That's really
so obviously they know how to speak to a Kenyan audience, but they wanted our perspective on some of their materials when they were promoting and doing some nonprofit marketing for an American audience. And so it was really cool getting to see that skill set be useful in an international context. So
for sure. The reason I asked about it is because our mission is to bring hope and opportunity to the Appalachian region, but it's obviously much bigger than that. And you guys take hope and opportunity, whether it's opportunity to serve or give or partner, and obviously like the message of the gospel is hope, right?
Absolutely. And often when you find when you come back that you are more changed than you did actually make change in the community. And I think you can see that regardless of where you're serving. I think that there are people that come to Appalachia, we're going to bring culture to this community, all these sort of things. We're gonna change them. And what you find is you find hope in Appalachia. You find a people who understand family, and there's just such a richness here that, as somebody who's not from here, I just find it beautiful, and I'm glad to get to live in this community.
Are there any specific differences you see between like back home in Texas and Appalachia in terms of like culture? Because they're both considered like the South, right? In quotes.
Yeah. So there definitely are a few things that are different, but I would say there's more similar. So for one, it's not coal out there, it's going to be oil. But I think that same reliance on a specific industry births some similarities. When you've got boom days, things are great. And when it's not so great, everything sort of changes. So I think from a hardiness standpoint, that's one thing I love about my Texas family and also my Appalachian family is just a hardiness of character, a perseverance, a willingness just to say, you know what, this is what it is, but not only are we just going to get through it, we're going to have joy and we're going to make it ours and take ownership of our culture. And you can really start to see this lately, especially in Appalachia in the last 5 to 7 years, taking ownership of the culture and being proud of it. And it's beautiful.
So you recently completed your PhD. Congrats on that.
Thank you. Finished in December 2018. It's been a year, but it does not feel that way.
So how's your continued education helped you as an educator and with your work at 127?
So I ended up in the leadership program. I did look at doctorates in communication, and I settled into this leadership program because it was at Cumberland. For one, I wanted to be able to continue teaching and not have to go to a different school to try to continue my education. So that was pretty significant. But what was most interesting is because the leadership program originated as an educational leadership program, as I was actually able to take a lot of education classes. So I looked at adult learning and the change process, which is a class that basically looks at how organizations and people change and accept change. So anytime you are leading significant change in an organization, what kind of conflicts arise? How do you manage those things? How do you bring people on board? And that's something that I think as people in marketing communication, you might have, particularly if you're an agency, you might have a client who the boss says they want one thing and they bring you in to do this thing. And then you talk to the other people at that organization and they don't want any of it. And so how do you, as a person coming into that organization, coach the boss, if you will, through making those changes or help them implement those themselves? And so that's just one way where that leadership degree has really helped me as almost a coach and a facilitator, more than just someone who delivers information. And so that's been a real priority for me. My research, so my emphasis was in Christian ministry, so I was able to take some theology classes, but I really focused in on studying small group ministry and looking at the discipleship process. And so that's something I'm very passionate about. And considering that so much work happens in the context of a small group of people coming together to accomplish a thing, whatever that is, whether it's in a ministry context or it's in a marketing context, understanding group dynamics and that process has been really instructive for me. It means actually I try to do more group work than I think sometimes my students even like, just because I know how important it's going to be for them in the workplace.
So is that one of the changes that came through that additional education?
Oh, absolutely. It really helped it helped me make some changes in terms of the way I lecture, in terms of the kinds of projects that I encourage, but also sometimes the expectations I have on students. It helped me make some adjustments. I mean, 5 years is not a very long time to have been teaching. Whenever I consider my colleagues, many of who have been teaching for 15, 20 years, and I think about how much, and this is something I try to communicate, is your first years in the workforce. I mean, no, this wasn't my first job, but your first few years in a new position are not going to look the same as the 5 years that follow, because I would say your first full year is really just figuring out what the heck you're doing. Your second year is saying, okay, what did I totally mess up my first year, and how am I going to fix those things? And it's this continuous reshaping process. Also, while you take in new information, you learn more about your field, you go to more conferences, you get more professional development. And that process really shouldn't ever end.
Yeah. I think that that could be applied to just life. Like you take your first year out of college and you reapply it to what you should have learned, and then just reapplying every year. It's like, all right, let's move on from that.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I like about that is there's so much self-evaluation in it and self-assessment, and not to get too education nerdy, but when we think about metacognition, if you guys remember that, it's thinking about your thinking. And so whenever you finish your first year out of college, you go back and you're like, okay, well, didn't do my taxes on time, had to pay that fine. So this year I'm going to reshape my process. Or I lived on ramen noodles for my first full year. In my second year, how do I think I want to, maybe I only want to eat ramen once a week or twice a week instead. There are all kinds of things you can do when you reevaluate and make adjustments.
But to your credit, you're going to have your loans paid off way before I do.
And that's a priority too.
So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about this, coming from an educator more than maybe like a practitioner like we are. So how do you see advertising changing in the future? Is there like things that you've been learning that you're having to teach on, because you're trying to prepare people for the workplace of tomorrow. Mm-hmm. So how do you see advertising changing in the future?
I think one of the most valuable things I can do as an instructor is remember that, this is going to sound bad, what I teach you today will be outdated 5 years from now. Mm-hmm. And so it is more important that you learn how to think than that you learn a tutorial for how to operate a certain platform. Right. That's one of the challenging and most frustrating elements of teaching a class like social media. Yeah. But really, the only class I've noticed that hasn't changed very often is probably the audience insight consumer behavior class, because so much of that is based on psychology, and that changes less than some of these other things do. And so what I'm constantly asking myself is, am I trying too hard to teach a platform, or am I really developing some of those critical thinking skills? Because the platform might not be here in 5 years, whether it's a specific social network or it's a tool like Hootsuite or some of these others. Those change so quickly. And if I want my students to still be employed 10, 15, 20 years from now, they have to know how to pursue their own professional development and continually change. So the way I sort of break this out is we do a lot of certifications, just in the sense because I know those look good on a resume. That's going to help your initial 5 years out to make sure you can get that job. But what we focus on in the classroom are hopefully the more long-term theories that underpin marketing and communication. Because it's just going to keep changing. I think an emphasis on brand promotion and branding in general. I was talking with somebody just a couple of days ago about just integrated brand management. Is going to be probably one of the major things over the next 10 years, but then also approaching your communication strategy from an integrated approach. There isn't anything you do that should be isolated from anything else, whether it's your public relations strategy versus your advertising strategy versus how you present customer service. It all has to be in line with the brand management side of things. So shifting gears a little bit toward that.
And I think to an extent that's been a push across the board with newer social media and different ways that people are interacting with their audiences. I feel like everyone's seeing an integration of everything. It's almost just becoming a uniformed front despite the brand, which is really interesting to see.
Even when you look at the Super Bowl ads, the ones that didn't provide some kind of integrated element, they didn't also have a social media ad campaign. They didn't also have a landing page on their website. They weren't, in fact, that's one of the things that, so Mr. Peanut, I'm sure you guys were keeping up with all of those things. I saw somebody fussing at them on Twitter because they didn't have a separate landing page for Baby Nut. When that's these days, that's the expectation. Yeah, you did the funny video, you put it out into your mass media, on TV, you had it on social, but how did you leave your website out of this process? You have to really approach it as, if here's my message, here's my concept, what does this look like on all of the other strategic elements I'm pursuing? And that means as professionals, we can't just do one thing. We can't be really good at just one thing. We really have to at least understand how the whole strategy works.
For sure. That's a good word. And it's I guess it makes sense that integrated platforms are becoming more prominent because there's just so many more now. It's like it's not just like radio and TV that you deal with. It's like social, but then there's like however many social. It's a new one every day. Yeah. And then websites and.
Well, and even if the I think that is sometimes most frustrating is because so many of them are pretty similar, but they each have their own
idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, and the audiences are so quirky and different. What works on one won't generate any interactions on another, and so and then of course the algorithms themselves are changing. I think it was it Tracker? I'll have to look, but they just released an Instagram algorithm for 2020, and they got some info from Instagram about how Instagram prioritizes content because it's not chronological anymore, and it's not really like Facebook. And so part of it was, how interested they think you are in the person. Now, these are all your followers. This is just what comes in your newsfeed. How likely you are to engage with them, sure, but also that person's frequency of posting. It was this whole set of things. And one of the things they admitted is their algorithm was constantly changing through machine learning. It wasn't that every couple of weeks they make an adjustment and then they monitor, and then a few weeks later they make a new adjustment. No, with machine learning, they're constantly changing that algorithm, which provides a pretty major challenge for people writing copy and shooting those videos and doing that photography. 3 times a week is what they said for Instagram. I don't know what those are for some of the others, but really that's going to be that threshold, which makes sense. I mean, if I look at my personal accounts, I'm not one for posting a lot on social media, but I'm contemplating doing my own social experiment if on Instagram, if I start posting at least 3 times a week, will I see overall engagement increase, even from a personal branding perspective?
That'd be fun to do.
When you're a nerd.
It's always an experiment to do.
Social experiment.
When you're into this kind of stuff, I don't know that other people would enjoy it.
Yeah. She's posting at the same time every few days a week.
So we've been asking everyone the same closing question as well. And that closing question is, what's something new you've tried recently? Whether it's personally, professionally, educationally, foodily maybe. So what's something new you've tried recently or are trying, and how did it go?
Something I'm most excited about. I don't know. It makes me feel like I should be trying more new things if I can't come up with anything.
Yeah. Have you read a new book?
Okay, so that was one of my New Year's resolutions, was to read more in general. I think a lot of people say that, but specifically I wanted to read more fiction, because what tends to happen is I end up reading a lot of business books. I read a lot of ministry books. I read those sort of things. And so I don't seem to have a hard time of reading those things, but they can, if you're like me, wear on you over time. So even if it's just 10 to 15 minutes a day of a book that's just sort of a breath of fresh air. So I finished Jolena Petersham's How the Light Gets In. She's actually a Cumberland grad, and it was phenomenal. It really was thought-provoking and didn't leave me feeling tired or inadequate when I was done, which sometimes both the business and the ministry books can make you feel that way. So that was something new that I'm doing, that I've really enjoyed, among a bunch of other things in the last year.
Awesome. Yeah. I love a good book.
Yeah.
I'm not really good at reading fiction either.
I used to do it all the time, and then I went to college and stopped completely. I'm also listening to more podcasts lately, I think in the last 6 months or so, which this is important. I will throw a shout out to 127 also has a podcast. It's called Simply 127. And it goes through information on orphan care and just provides a variety of resources for people wanting to get involved both domestically and internationally. So they do these kinds of interviews and it's a blast. So shout out to Sarah Beth Ventris, our founder, and the 127 podcast.
Anything else you want to plug while we got the chance?
Oh, goodness gracious. Anything else I want to shamelessly promote? I mean, there are probably a lot of things that I could. I would say I know we're in Corbin, but the London community in general, because we have a new pizza place, Sauced, and it's delicious. We now have a Marshall's, which is pretty sweet, and a Planet Fitness, like coming up in the world, catching up with Corbin. I'm just kidding. But I just love overall the community relationships that are happening in Appalachia, whether it's between London and Corbin or just seeing all these relationships we built. It's pretty sweet. Yeah. Pretty sweet.
For sure. Well, Jordan, Dr. Carmack, sorry.
Thank you. No, you're
Dr.
fine.
Carmack, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us today. We'll let you go get to class, and we will catch you guys next time on the Hollercast.
Thank you.